All right, well, let's find out who is going to win this one. Ken Yukihiro needs an opponent. I'm going to pass it on over to Cedric and Monty.
Ken Yukihiro does need an opponent, and we are going to find out who it's going to be. Cedric Phillips, Monty DeVuti. We are here in the booth for our second and final semifinal round. It's an Is It Prowess mirror, which you and I have had the pleasure of covering multiple times here this weekend, though this time, as Corey did mention, slight differences. Most notable one player has Monastery Swiss Spear, the other, Robb, does not.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a litmus test for Toni Portolan's build of Is It Prowess. Both players 4-1 over the course of the weekend in the mirror, but most importantly, in the one matchup they have had against each other, it was Robb that came out victorious. So Toni being fueled by a bit of revenge, I would say here. One thing that he did say earlier in an interview that was interesting was Monastery Swiss Spear, he thinks gives him an advantage on the draw in the matchup of the mirror. And that's where he's going to be for a lot of this match, considering it was Ian that was the higher seed.
Well, we are underway here. Both players look like they are starting with 7 cards. And welcome to our semifinals. Winner plays against Ken Yukihiro for the title. As a Shivan Reef is where Robb will get this matchup started. For Toni, you can see the hand here, and more importantly, you can see the option. Shivan Reef and Island, those are the lands that he's choosing from. Looks like there might be a mountain in there too. Then you see an Opt, a Monastery Swift Spear, a Torch the Tower, a Sleight of Hand, and a Quarry Steel Cutter. So that is the Swift Spear, and this is a Torch the Tower. Take care of the 1-drop.
Yeah, I think deciding whether he did want to run out the Monastery Swiss Spear there with no ability to protect it, using something like an Opt or a Sleight of Hand to push it up. Here, Ian did have access to the 1 copy of Spell Pierce in his hand, but puts the shields down to get the Drake Hatcher down, and that's where it gives Toni an opportunity to resolve the first Quarry Steel Cutter of the match.
Quarry Steel Cutter is on the battlefield here for Toni. Could be for Ian as well, and it will. There's the Prowess trigger. This is an Into the Flood Ball.
You get fish.
A fish is on the way. What a gift. What a nice
gift.
I'll attack for 5.
And there's an attack for 5.
I'll trigger Drake Hatcher.
So there's 3 incubation counters being picked up. That's the magic number, of course. Well, a magic number. That is 1 Drake able to be made. And Toni, the biggest loss here is just the tempo. Having that Quarry Steel Cutter back in hand, what Toni was really hoping for this turn was he would be able to play the 2nd copy of Quarry Steel Cutter that is in his hand, follow that up with an Opt to make some creatures and start going wide. And now Ian has more or less robbed him of that ability, given him a fish to work with, but not much else, and that means whatever Toni is doing, he is still going to be behind in this situation.
Toni with a lot of cards in hand, a couple of copies of Opt, a Torch the Tower, a Sleight of Hand, and a Quarry Steel Cutter. That Steel Cutter was bounced, of course, by that into the Flood Maw, so it's back on the battlefield, and now the follow-up will be a Torch the Tower. I promise it's not targeting that fish. We'll see what it is going to target, and it's going to be that Drake Hatcher. And now there is the token. The Drake is on the battlefield from the Hatcher in response to the Torch the Tower. And now here's the Scry from the Torch the Tower, given that it was bargained.
Right, that was the fish token being sacrificed for the bargain in order to clear off the Drake Hatcher. Now the question for Toni is, do you want to trade off your 2/2 token for the 2/2 Drake, or do you want to stay back? Of course, it's not going to be a good blocker, so the question is this Prowess token more valuable? And Toni ultimately deciding it is, considering he has a handful of spells.
Here is stock up. 1 Prowess trigger on the Quarry Steel Cutter. So that powerful 3-mana sorcery is done resolving. And now it'll be a River Pyre Verge. And Torch taking care of the Monk. Trigger the Cutter. There's the Monk. Here come the beatdowns. Looks like 7 all day.
And then 4 here. So 7. Yep.
2 Prowess on that Monk, 0 on the freshly made one, but of course it is getting +1 from the Quarry Steel Cutter. And that means turn goes back to Toni, who does have some play still with the 2nd copy of Quarry Steel Cutter, and especially picking up into the Flood Maw now, is able to clear off 1 of these tokens and create 2 more of his own. But again, the biggest issue here is just the fact that he is not defending well. Now, This is going to still be pretty awkward. What he would have loved is to be able to go for the gamble, maybe cast an opt and try to find a fourth land in this spot, but that's not a luxury he has, that he has to just play defensively in order to not die from 7 life. Never mind.
Never mind has been announced, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Monstrous Rage, that happens to change some things quite often in this standard format.
Yeah, I think Ian has certainly the opportunity to cast the Swordfisher's Talent plus the Monstrous Rage here. He does even have the ability, even though I don't think he will be doing that, to Spell Pierce his own Swordfisher's Talent if he wants to just get an extra trigger here. And if he's done the math for this being lethal, then he may go for that. We'll see.
Yeah, he's doing a little bit of math right now before he makes his next move. The Storm Chaser's Talent, not much of a surprise. We'll see if there will be a Spell Pierce here or not.
I think he's just going to go for it. I think he's done some amount of math that this is going to be lethal.
Yep. I'm just curious, and that's what I think he's thinking is, do I need to Spell Pierce this? Yep, and that's more prowess triggers.
Did it resolve? Or sorry, I did my prowess triggers while it's still on the stack. I'm going to go Spell Pierce. Or sorry, am I stacking it correctly? Yeah. So I cast this. I resolve my cutter trigger.
And then resolve the prowess triggers.
Yes.
Is your question whether you...
This is still on the stack, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Okay. Then I'll cast Spell Pierce.
Okay.
There you
This. Trigger prowess.
Sure.
Yep,
So
he's
this
done
should
everything
be-
correctly.
I apologize. That was. And then I will attack.
Big
So
bigs.
this is
7.
7, 4, and 3.
Yep,
are the features.
and the one that has 7 power is Trample. That's the most notable part about this.
4, 7, 3. These two are from.
so this
I
is
guess 2 of them have Trample because one of them has Corey
no,
Steelcutter
this is
on it.
7
Sure
plus
does.
3 at
Yeah.
10. So if I jump like this, and I block like
This is 8 damage coming
this,
through, I
I
believe.
take. Yeah.
Dead. Dead.
Alpha
Ian Robb
Game 1.
gets the job. All done. Up a game. Making it look easy, as he has most of this weekend here with his prowess.
Look, I'm not saying unstoppable forces, but way back yesterday in round 14, I think, when we put 2 people in the top 8, it was Ken Yukihiro. Where's he now?
Into the final.
Yeah, and Ian Robb.
2
On his
games
way.
away from being into the final.
All right. Just saying. Feels like we've been building up to this.
Maybe a little. Maybe a little. But Toni, I imagine, has something to say about this. So going to get a shuffle in here in just a moment. Game number 2 is going to be underway. Remember, our first couple of games, they are pre-sideboard. The 3rd, 4th, and potentially 5th game will be post-sideboard. So just game 1 configurations here between these 2 players, and we'll be getting back to game action here in just a moment. But if you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Monty DeVuti, we are here at the semifinals of Pro Tour Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy at MagicCon Las Vegas. 19,000 plus of our closest friends have come to the biggest MagicCon of all time, excuse me. And we had quite a few players in this Pro Tour. But we've whittled ourselves down to 3. Ken Yukihiro is into the final, and we have these 2 in front of us in Toni Portolan and Ian Robb, who is currently up a game. Monty, I will ask you this with Toni on the play. What is the opening hand that he needs to find here to tie things up?
What he's really looking for is Corey Steelcutter as the turn 2 play. Turn 1, you're okay starting off with the Swift Sphere. I think ideally you're using one of your 1-mana spells to set up a draw, whether that is a sleight of hand or an opt. So probably 3 lands, Corey Steelcutter, and then let's say 1 removal spell, 2 draw spells. I think that's what I'm going to go with.
Okay.
The big thing here for Toni, of course, what we've mentioned is he has the Swift Spears. No one else does. He thinks it gives him a bit of a boost on the draw in the matchup. But that's not to say that the matchup is good for him on the draw. He is still behind, as is the case for everybody in this mirror match situation. The draw is weaker for these decks. So it is very important for him to win every game that he is on the play in order to only have to win 1 game on the draw.
Let's get to game number 2, shall we? Toni's on the play. How many cards? We will find out. You can see Vivi amongst the cards on our little card viewer there on the left. And it looks like
I'm at 19. Yep.
It's going to be 7. There's a Swift Spear.
Yeah, 7s for both. And, you know, there's no third land, but this hand's looking pretty excellent.
Yeah, this is a really nice hand for Toni with Steel Cutter, Cantrips, VV as well. Just missing the third land, as you did mention, but perhaps that's what the sleight of hand will take care of.
Yeah, and the big saving grace here, of course, is the fact that Ian has started off with Thundering Faults, so that means no worries about a singleton copy of Spell Pierce coming out, making anything awkward. You're pushing damage across, you're getting your Core Steel Cutter onto the battlefield, knowing that I believe Ian only has 1 copy of Abrade in the main deck. None, actually, excuse me, for Ian, so this is already going to be safe, and that means for Toni, he has free reign here.
A couple of Steel Cutters on the battlefield now for both players, and now we'll see how Toni wants to attempt to take advantage. The third land may have been found there in the mountain, but we'll start here with a sleight of hand. So, Trigger Prowess 1, third land for sure there in a Shivan Reef, but I think Into the Floodmaw is going to be headed to the bottom. So, third land problem is solved if it was missing.
Yeah, and I think the bigger issue was actually, if there is even a mountain in Toni's hand, was the fact that he didn't have a second blue source yet, and all of his second spells that he could have cast this turn required blue. So if Toni had not found that Shivan Reef and wasn't able to double spell this turn, all the advantage that he would have had from a start would have essentially dissipated. So this was a massive find, and now he gets to actually really present the pressure that Ian has to be afraid of in this situation.
Going to try to continue running downhill is Toni. Going to pass the turn back to Ian, who is untapping on his third turn of the game at 12 life. Brutal.
We are still finalizing what Toni's hand situation is here. And we know that VV is there, and I believe another copy of Storm Chaser's Talent. And possibly a mountain. Not getting a good look at it, of course.
That is a River Pyre Verge, excuse me. Oof. Okay.
Now, this isn't the worst case scenario pass, because Ian, of course, has the ability to cast multiple spells at instant speed and trigger the Core Steel Cutter. But this is still a situation where he is in a decent bit of trouble.
Well, that mountain that we weren't sure of is on the battlefield now, and here comes VV. So the Legendary Wizard has joined the battlefield, both players having access to it here this week, and now there's a copy of Storm Chaser's Talent. So that's going to trigger Steel Cutter, VV, and a whole host of prowess triggers as well.
Yeah. I'll write down.
So there should be an actual +1/+1 counter on VV. There should be...
This will be all in response.
Of course.
Opt is done resolving.
Bounce Vivi, trigger my cutter.
Vivi is going to get bounced. Cutter gets triggered. Monk here for Ian. And now the 1 damage from Vivi will resolve.
How many cards?
I have 5.
And 5 cards there. Monstrous Rage going to try to play some defense here.
Yeah. I'm at 11.
And I get 10 water.
Yep.
And I need to think about the...
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so I believe there is 1 prowess trigger on everything that is unequipped there, and no prowess triggers on the Core Steel Cutter equipped monk.
Correct. So with that in mind, an Otter is a 2/2. Swift Spear is a 2/3. Monk is a 2/2. And the other monk should be a 2/2, but that one has trample.
And I think that means even with Ian Robb having a 2/2 monk in this position, you're happy to just send everything in. Trading 1 creature potentially here, even 2 if your opponent has a removal spell to push some damage across in this spot is very appealing.
3/3, that's it.
Yep.
That's Monster Rage on here, trigger prowess. And then I will block. Sure.
Okay. I'm a little surprised. A very conservative turn there from Toni. And we're going to head back over to Ian.
And notably, excuse me, Toni didn't actually equip the Steel Cutter to the new monk, so only attacked with a 3/3 creature, saying that I'm valuing my wide creatures more than trading anything for a monk unless you're forced to use a spell here. And that was the situation where Ian did have a spell, saying that I can do better next turn if I have a wider board.
I think it's just for visual.
cards, correct? Yep.
And this is fascinating because with this Torch to the Tower here and the 2 copies of Monstrous Rage in hand, Ian is actually going to have the option to trigger Corey's Steel Cutter.
Again.
The mythical twice in a turn cycle.
Yeah.
Once on my turn, once on yours. And yeah, that's one that we don't see very often because it does require 4 cheap spells, including 2 instants, to be cast. And that is something that Ian has access to. So Toni, in all of his math, may be caught off guard by that.
This game's taking a very interesting texture and turn to it now, because normally in spots, especially with Toni's with such an overwhelming advantage to start, you would think that Ian,
Or excuse me, 4.
his attempts to be defensive would fail, but they're actually working out pretty well.
Yeah, it
That's you.
definitely, if Toni loses this game, and it is a matter of a lack of damage rather than a lack of resources, has to go back to that previous turn where he played very conservatively, decided to just attack with 1 creature and save everything else back. But of course, these games have been very swingy back and forth, so seeing this shift in Toni's favor or in Ian's favor, excuse me, shouldn't be the most surprising, as Toni is again about to have a pretty good turn, can go VV into sleight of hand, put a counter on it if Ian doesn't have access to another copy of Into the Floodmaw. If Ian does have another Into the Floodmaw, that would be negating your Monstrous Rage anyways, so you prefer it to get used in this position.
Yep.
And I think Toni still has a lot of game left for him this turn.
Trigger.
Steel Cutter's going to trigger, VV triggered, Prowess triggers will resolve, and now here is the sleight of hand. So 1, 2. VV and Into the Floodmaw.
I'm going to guess that he's going to take Into the Floodmaw with this one.
That's my guess as well. There's 1. It looks like VV's probably headed down under.
You're at 10, right?
10 to 14.
Sorry, what are life totals?
10 to 14. I
13.
have 13. Oh, you took one. Okay. Oh, you took one off Shrimp Brief. Yes. Yep.
10 to
I
13.
noticed Shrimp Brief.
Yep, just making sure that both players have the correct life total, as do we,
Okay.
which is the case.
Counter, did you also deal damage?
Yes, I'm at 10. Yes.
And our table spotter making sure everything is exactly where it should be before Toni decides how to attack for the turn. Again, remember, 1 spell just played right now, which is the Sleight of Hand. So, Prowess triggers on the 2 otters and the monks. The monk, excuse me.
Corey's Steel Cutter has been triggered already, so there is no imperative here on Toni to cast Into the Floodmaw before going to attackers.
Correct.
So now it's only a question of, are you going to play Into the Floodmaw, or are you going to hold back Monstrous Rage, attack, put the onus on Ian if he's planning on doing anything before blocks to potentially make another creature, and then if not, you can Monstrous Rage after blocks.
Well, there's Into the Floodmaw. Trigger VV.
Fine. I'm thinking about the rest.
Asked and answered.
Yep. Down,
These are 3 threes, correct?
down to 9. These are all 3 threes. They can all attack.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, pick that up.
And I believe that is game, because Ian is able to make 1 blocker here using both Monstrous Rages, and that would still be 9 damage being taken.
That's correct. That is going to do it. So, Toni going to tie things up against Ian Robb. These are Prowess Mirror. We're going to at least play 4 games.
Yep.
At least 4, maybe 5. We'll see. The attempt there with the defensive Monstrous Rages, that would have been really interesting. You talked about the mythical turn cycle with Corey Steel Cutter making something on offense and defense. Didn't end up coming to fruition, but it was certainly an option there for Robb.
It was definitely something that could have happened, but ultimately Toni played the game exactly as he needed to, which was using his draw spells to find that 1-mana interaction Into the Floodmaw, the perfect one for that turn, just ensuring that if he had found a Torch to the Tower instead, that could have gone really wrong, because you would see Monstrous Rage, buff my creature up a bit, getting some Prowess triggers, and suddenly your Torch to the Tower is negated. So found the right things, played it the right way, had lethal damage.
We're all tied up. We're going to take a short break here from Las Vegas. When we do come back, these players will be sideboarded and good to go. Game number 3 between Ian Robb and Toni Portolan coming up right after this. Welcome back to MagicCon Las Vegas, maybe more importantly, Pro Tour Final Fantasy at the largest MagicCon of all time. Ooh, Chandra's Fireball. We watched our friends at the news desk play that basketball game earlier.
We sure did.
That was fun.
You did some pretty great commentary on that. Maybe the best work you've done all weekend, I would say.
Wow, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I'll try to do some better work. You and I, after we're done here, Street Fighter 2.
All right, perfect.
Hope you're ready. Cedric Phillips, Monty DeVuti, we are here in the booth. 2 games done between Ian and Tony. We're all tied up, which means we're going to take a quick look at the deck list here between these 2 players and see what options they do have in their sideboards. You see, they are shuffling up and getting ready here for game number 3. Open deck list tournament, they get the opportunity to take a look at each other's deck lists. So we figure, you know what? We'll do the same. Monty, let's start with Ian.
Yeah, so Ian Robb is the kind of hybrid version of the Prowess deck that we've seen. The full 4 copies of VV, 3 copies of Draycatcher, so eschewing the low to the ground Monastery Swiftspear version in order to have bigger threats. He does still have access to 2 copies of Wild Ride. That is a card that is both extremely powerful with VV, allowing you to attack for a large chunk at haste speed, while also creating a lot of mana by triggering it if you start with 4 mana for the turn. Also extremely powerful with Draycatcher, getting you to that mythical 6 power point. Out of the sideboard, one thing we've seen from Ian is the Abrades have been absolutely massive, as well as the Lithomantic Barrages. What we saw in the previous matchup, which Ian won 3-0, was he brought in both Lithomantic Barrage, both Abrade, and both Spell Pierce, where he was on the draw post board. What we haven't seen so far is Ian on the play post board in this top 8. And what we're seeing this game is actually doing a different strategy for sideboarding on the play, which is he's only brought in 1 Spell Pierce and 1 Lithomantic Barrage, rather than the full 2. He has taken out 1 VV, 1 Monstrous Rage, 1 Torch the Tower, as well as 1 Wild Ride, saying that when I'm on the play, I don't need as much reaction, and I'm just going to continue enacting my game plan in the best way possible. On the other side, for Toni Portolan, we've seen him do the exact same sideboarding strategy every time that we've seen him play so far. He thinks these Swift Spears help him out on the draw, so he's hoping to use those to break parity here. But taking a look at his sideboard, he likes to keep it nice, clean, and simple. 1 Spell Pierce out, 1 VV out, 1 Monstrous Rage out, similar cards. 2 Roaring Furnace, 1 Abrade in, that's it.
Clean, easy. And we'll see how it goes for both of these players who have played against each other once earlier in the tournament. Tony, as we've mentioned before, looking for perhaps a little bit of revenge here against Ian. And we are going to have at least 2 more games in front of us, hopefully 3, because we do love Game 5 in competitive Magic, believe you me. So, as these players do shuffle up, do remember the winner of this match is moving on to the finals to compete for $50,000, a beautiful trophy, a winner's interview with Haley Loney, and the most bragging rights there's ever been to say you're the Pro Tour Final Fantasy champion, but they have to get through, some pretty good magician named Ken Yukihiro playing mono red.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, not
pretty good
too
guy.
bad.
7 top finishes,
Yeah.
pretty good.
And Ken has said repeatedly, best mono red player.
Yeah.
Hard to argue given the results of the weekend.
Yeah, he proved it. Now we're looking for the best Prowess player.
Yes, we
And then
are.
we'll pit them against each other. What was always going to be the outcome of this Pro Tour, one could say.
Oh, you think so? How do you think the Zorgus Omniscience players feel about that analysis?
One of them should have made top 8, and then we could have asked them.
That's fair. That's fair.
Now, the one thing I will say is, Tony looking for revenge. If you lose in the Swiss, that's losing the battle. But if you win in the top 8,
That's winning the war.
that's winning the war.
Yes, this is true. This is true. Look at you. Look at you. These players are going to take a look at their opening hands right now. A couple of lands here for Ian. That's a very quick keep for him. It's a mulligan here for Tony. So time to shuffle up and find 6. That'll work for the member of Team Sanctum of All.
Yeah, I believe that was a mountain and 3 sleight of hands.
That's not going to do it.
Not great.
I'll tell you that much. And take a look at Ian's hand right here, a Lithomantic Barrage, a Monstrous Rage, Stock Up, Quarry Steelcutter, Torch the Tower, a Mountain, and a River Pyre Verge. So a healthy amount of interaction, and Stock Up to refill if time does allow.
Right. Really has more or less everything you would like. You are missing the cheap draw spells. That would have been nice, but you do have this Corey Steel Cutter. One of the things that we know, maybe Ian does not, is that Toni actually boards out his copy of Spell Pierce here in the matchup. So Ian may play around a Spell Pierce on turn 2 with Corey Steel Cutter if Toni is leaving the mana off. But if, for example, he's seen the footage of the quarterfinals.
Table Alpha ready for game 3.
Oh, you can take a look at Tony's hand, and that's a world of difference, folks, because that one does not look great as things currently stand, but draw steps can certainly improve things. As there's a cutter. And Ian's going to put Toni to the test right away. I think we're going to see that abrade, and we will. So the very powerful equipment is gone, at least for now.
Yeah, no fear from Ian running the cutter out there.
Yep. So now here is the stock up.
Very much taking advantage of the fact that Tony's on a mulligan and his hand has already shown some amount of weakness. No Storm Chaser's Talon, no Sleight of Hand, no Opt on turn 1, no Spell Pierce, otherwise you would have already seen it cast. And turn 2, it was just reactive. Abrade to deal with Cutter means that Ian can more or less feel like he has free reign here to set up. Has another Cutter in hand, I believe, so with the stock up will certainly put himself in a position where he can go Cutter into second spell next turn and has a lot of reactive spells to go with it.
Well, stock up's not a bad draw because Toni did not have any action really at all. So take a look at the top 5. Wild Ride is among them. That's one. Now it's time to figure out what the second one's going to be.
Yeah, this is how it begins. I do believe he picked up that Roaring Furnace, so that is an interesting avenue of fighting in this matchup. If he can ever actually land the door on his second side, the Steaming Sauna, that could get interesting.
Attacking for 2.
Corey Steel Cutter into Storm Chaser's Talon. There's a 1-2 punch we've been seeing all weekend long, so it is timely here for Ian Robb as the Monk token's going to come across for a couple points of damage.
Toni would love a VV off the top here if his deck was kind enough to bestow it to him. It was.
That is a Shivan Reef. Corey Steel Cutter is in hand, so it's no VV, but it's no slouch either.
Yeah, being able to go Corey Steel Cutter into the Roaring Furnace here, clear off the Otter, and make a creature. That's pretty good.
I'll get the...
Looks like the Furnace is going to take care of the Monk. And now a Monk will be made via the Steel Cutter, and we'll see if Toni wants to attack or not.
Yeah, I believe just getting the locked paper out, that is equipped.
All right, let's get a little aggressive, says Toni. 18 all. We're going to head back Ian's way.
All I'm saying is Tony's hand's still not great, but, you know, 5 mana, Steaming Sauna. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card, Cedric.
I mean,
Card advantage, pretty cool.
dream big, buddy. Dream big.
Look,
While you're thinking about that, here's some damage for you, okay?
yeah, while
Okay.
I'm thinking about the sauna, Ian's
Yep.
studying the Corey Steel Cutter blade.
That's right.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
We're gonna head back Tony's way. I'm going to assume we will not see the door unlock in that Steaming Sauna room.
No, you don't think so? You don't think he's
That'd be-
going to tap out to go sauna and die?
That would be a tough way to do it.
Yeah, I do think Toni is pretty priced into going Monastery Swift Spear here. Make sure he is triggering the Corey Steel Cutter. Somehow, I do believe he has into the Floodmaw in hand as well as Wild Ride. He could fire off Wild Ride here just to get aggressive, and then he would still have access to into the Floodmaw in hand to use as a trick on Ian's turn, potentially.
Yeah, it's tough here because Wild Ride is the kind of card where you don't want to play Wild Ride to trigger the Corey Steel Cutter and then just say go. You feel like you're missing out on a ton of damage that way. And as we have said time and time again, this prowess strategy doesn't play the best of defense. So, you know, one could argue that a good defense is actually a good offense. And we'll see if Toni agrees with that cliche.
Yeah, it's awkward for Toni. Of course, he doesn't know this, but Ian has 2 copies of Monstrous Rage in hand, and those are going to do a great job of pushing damage through, sort of regardless of how Toni decides to play this. But from Toni's point of view, he feels like he can beat 1 Monstrous Rage, so it's possible that he attacks with the Swift Spear here, saying the 4 5 damage being represented is too much to give up.
Let's see what this is going to be. Into the Flood Maw, bounce that. Beat downs, looks like maybe try to get as much as possible in here.
Yeah.
This could be the just attack for as much as possible, hope that your hand isn't very good. That's the only chance that I have strategy.
9, sorry, yeah. 3 and then 6. Yep.
Which,
I'll be
look,
9.
it's a plan because playing defense ain't going to work on this battlefield, so I get this attack.
Yeah, play that loud for the sun the next turn.
There you
It's
go.
coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Unfortunately here for
Don't
Toni.
say it. Don't do my heart like that.
I know. Unfortunately for Toni here, in the words of one Wade Barrett, I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Mr. Robb's wild ride is about to begin.
Yeah.
That's great to know. It's current.
It's beat down o'clock, buddy.
That's wild ride.
Boom. We're all done. Ian Robb's one game away, everybody, from meeting Ken Yukihiro in the finals, as that cutter draw was much too powerful for Toni to overcome. Much too powerful.
I saw
Definitely too
that,
powerful. That was
Thursday night
Tony's
Colgate
mulligan.
too.
That was Ian's being on the play. So a lot of what just happened there to be expected. Now the big question for Toni is, how is he going to respond? Because right now he needs to win 2 in a row.
Well, you tell me, what's the sideboarding look like here for game number 4, where Toni is going to be on the play?
All right, so Toni has changed it up a bit. He's getting more aggressive on the play. So the copy of Roaring Furnace that was brought in previously, that's gone again. No Steaming Sauna, rest in peace to the Steaming Sauna fans. But a Monstrous Rage has come back in, so he is looking to get aggressive. Robb, on the other hand, 1 copy of VV, another Monstrous Rage, and a Stock Up have been taken out, and he is going fully reactive here. So bringing in a Torch to the Tower that he boarded out in the previous game, as well as the Spell Pierce and Lithomantic Barrage that he chose to leave in the sideboard of the previous game. He is doing a lot of what we saw in the previous match when he was on the draw post board.
Ian's got to be feeling pretty good. He's up 2-1 right now. He's already won this matchup plenty of times on the weekend, and he's actually already beaten Toni once. So he must be thinking, well, there's no reason I can't do it twice. I get 2 shots at it.
Yeah,
And if everything goes wrong here, I'm on the play game 5?
I feel like he's feeling pretty good. Yeah, you know, there's also the fact that he top-8'd a Pro Tour and then came back and top-8'd another Pro Tour back-to-back. I think he's feeling pretty good.
He's making it look pretty easy so far in his journey into the professional Magic scene. We saw the top 8 at Pro Tour Ether Drift in Chicago a couple of months ago. Barely squeaked into the top 8 of the tournament that Matt Nass did win, and now is looking to become a Pro Tour champion. Again, we've seen Ian have success in other card games, but is certainly making a name for himself in this one.
Yeah, everybody that has tested with him, they say that he is incredible at the game. He has an understanding of situations and patterns that is just very impressive to see, especially for someone who, again, has a lot of competitive experience, but maybe not as much competitive Magic experience up to this point. He's showing that that's not an issue.
Not at all. Not at all. And clearly looks very comfortable with his sequencing and playing of this deck. For those of you that are not as familiar with the sequencing of the Prowess strategy, it might be a little overwhelming at first, but Ian is very clearly fluent in this language of Magic and has made things look quite easy over the course of the weekend. Remember, first to 12 wins alongside Ken Yukihiro. They both made it into the top 8 the same round, got to that mythical 12th win, and then were pulled from the tournament because that's how we do things here on the Pro Tour. You get to that magic number of 12 before round number 16, your day is done. You've won enough. And then Ken has done his part of the bargain. He's already through to the finals. Ian, I think, is thinking right now, buddy, I'll see you there.
Yeah, but step 1, he needs to get past Toni Portolan. Toni has been here before in terms of this matchup. And now it's just a matter of overcoming Ian, the one person that has beat him in the Prowess Mirror this weekend. This is his chance for revenge.
Toni. Oh, I don't like that much. That's removal spell, wild ride, and a bunch of lands. I think you got to try to do a little bit better than that. Just when you're on the play, myself personally, I just want to be more proactive. Toni looks like he agrees, and Ian thinks he can do better as well. So they'll both send him back and start with at least 6.
They'll both send him back, but look, I gotta say, while they're mulliganing, for fans of the sauna,
Not this.
it's still in.
Well, it's fine that it's in. It's fine that it's in. That room ever gets unlocked.
What's
I
up?
don't know.
What's up? No. Finish the sentence.
No. Because I have a
Finish the
history. I have a
sentence. We got
history.
time.
I have a history of saying things that I'm not gonna. That I say I'm gonna do.
Uh-huh.
That are unlikely to happen, and then I have to do them.
Yep.
So if that sauna gets opened up, I accept it for what it is.
Okay.
I have no interest in doing the acrobatics here in Las Vegas.
All right, fair enough. Acceptance from Cedric. You know what? The sauna will accept that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll get there, I believe.
I mean, I would love to see the room get opened.
Yeah, no, me too.
2 cards a turn is lovely.
Yeah. No maximum hand size? Great.
Also great.
Yeah.
Just hard pressed. That's all. But also dream big, because I think it would be awesome.
Look, all I'm saying is 5 mana doesn't look like that much when VV stays on the board.
That particular game, if VV's turning out that way, the opponent.
No, it's the sauna.
No, it's the sauna, not
It's
the
the
VV.
sauna. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I'll be sure to pass that information along to both players as they take a look at their soon-to-be 6-card hands, perhaps. There's a couple of copies of Drake Hatcher. Ooh, this graphic tells me they're keeping. Spoiler! Thundering Falls, stock up, bunch of lands, Drake Hatchers. All right, 6 cards apiece. Tony, a little more aggressive.
Start of game 4.
Is it going to be a sleight of hand? No. Just going to pass the turn back with Into the Flood Moth already. There's just Fire Bluff Canal. And this Spell Pierce could be dagger.
Oh, that was a massive pickup for Ian. Is Tony really going to play around it in this spot? It's a big ask, but he found the Thundering Fall, so he could, in theory, take a turn off and then go for the attempt at Corey Steelcutter into Sleight of Hand the next turn if he wants. But, God, it's so tempting to just slam it down here. Your opponent's on a mulligan.
Oh, boy.
Oh, if Tony can read the Spell Pierce and not run into it, that would be nice. It's just a big ask.
Just going to say go.
Look at
Okay.
that.
Thundering Falls here.
Keep on top.
Pass the turn. All right, are we going to do this again now?
All right, Mr. Portolan.
Well, Stone Chaser's Talent actually makes it a little bit easier as far as deploying something on the battlefield, right? Getting some sort of creature out.
Yeah.
All right, you can go Storm Chaser's Talent, Sleight of Hand, hypothetically, right? Because you do have Cutter plus Into the Flood Maw the following turn. But this is funny. This is interesting because it's pretty face up now that he has a Cutter. Okay. Okay. You don't really think about this that much last turn or this turn if you don't have a Cutter. So now it's just, when do I want to deploy said Cutter? And the answer, once again, is not right now.
Yeah, no, Tony is displaying the patience that you would expect from a player of his caliber, but this is a tough spot. This is a tough spot, and he has fully identified how he's going to win this game.
That's Drake Catcher.
There's the Drake Catcher. That's the turn. So now we might see Into the Flood Maw. Looks like we're not going to. 4th land. See, and this is what makes the Steel Cutter kind of this action all pretty difficult, right? Because if you're going to play around exactly Spell Pierce, at some point, either you're going to stop doing that, or you need your 4th land in a deck that doesn't have that much mana, and you certainly don't want to be like sleight of handing 4 lands to try to resolve a Steel Cutter. So it also gets exacerbated on if you try to hold your Steel Cutter around Spell Pierce and then you draw another copy of Steel Cutter, it feels like you should have cast the first Steel Cutter. And so now we're kind of playing this weird game of like, all right, I'm never going to play a Steel Cutter. You'll put your shields down eventually, and that may just not be true.
Yeah, it is going to continue going back and forth, but right now, Tony's still not in the worst position until, of course, Ian fires off the stock up and it resolves. But at the moment, he is kind of okay.
I mean, the question, okay, so we haven't seen a game played like this yet in the Is It Prowess Mirror, right? We haven't seen this, I have Steel Cutter, I'm going to play around Spell Pierce sort of game.
Right.
So we haven't worked ourselves into the situation. And again, the question now is, how long are we going to play this little song and dance? Because at some point, the steel cutter might be too slow and you've missed your window for it to actually be impactful by playing the game the way that Toni is playing it. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying there are consequences to the decision that he is making.
Absolutely, but he is also, at this point, for better or worse, it feels like he is committed to the line that he's taken.
Oh,
which
it's
means
tough to
that-
change now.
Yeah, at this point, you have to just continue playing this way.
Yeah.
The biggest question as a third Drake catcher joins Ian's hand is Toni at any point going to attempt to tap Ian out, for example, on Ian's end step by just firing off an Abrade on one of these Drake catchers? Of course, Abrade you'd like to save for your opponent's Corey Steelcutter, but the Drake catchers are adding up. We're getting past the point of, oh, I can afford to hold an Abrade.
Yeah, and also what makes this pretty tough too is there is finally the 4th mana. So here's Corey Steelcutter. Yep, there's Spell Pierce to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, Ian is obligated to tap Toni out here.
Absolutely.
Knows that he can pay, but of course, by doing so, you're taking the turn away from Toni without giving him a token.
Remember prowess triggers here because of the artifact that has been cast. So the Otter's a 2/2, a Swift Spear's a 2/3.
Correct. And all the Drake catchers are going to be 2/4s.
Correct.
Now, Toni has an interesting choice here because technically he has the option of paying for Spell Pierce, but he could also not pay and instead use an Abrade to kill one of these Drake catchers to try to get the game under control. Because if you just pay and then pass the turn, Ian has free reign with 3 Drake catchers, and that might just end the game.
Yeah, and now this is what kind of makes this spot one that I don't love for Toni. Because and here's I'll explain why. If we're going to play around Spell Pierce, this assumes that our opponent has Spell Pierce, right?
Yep.
So when you have Corey Steelcutter and you get Spell Pierced,
Yep.
I feel like you should know what you want to do now.
Yeah.
Which is either pay or not pay.
Right.
Right? Because we've gone down this road where I'm going to play around Spell Pierce because I assume my opponent has Spell Pierce. So he's going to pay. And obviously it's game 4 of a Pro Tour, so certainly think about it. But I think your game plan has to continue to be in line with what you've been playing around the entire time.
Of course.
So
absolutely.
Here's the
And
sleight of hand.
ultimately, Toni did commit to the line, but there's still 3 Drake catchers.
There are.
It's a lot
And
of
there's
Drake
also
catchers.
there's also an Abrade here
Yeah.
for Ian. And not afraid to attack at all.
Oh, does that do anything? Does that?
Yeah, the Abrade, this...
Does that deal with?
It's well, the thing that's also really interesting is I think exactly the card Drake Catcher blows up exactly what Toni was playing around with the Spell Pierce stuff, because it was just like Drake Catcher leave up Spell Pierce, do it again. Now you have no good blocks.
Yeah, that's really the problem. Is Toni was hoping at any point that Ian would
I'll just try this true prowess.
Good golly,
show
Miss Mo.
some weakness, right? And instead, Ian continued leaving up both the Spell Pierce and developing a Drake Catcher every single turn.
Yeah. And it was repeatedly Drake Catcher, which one could argue was the best thing in this particular situation. That's what makes this so difficult here for Toni. And now Toni is extremely far behind.
Yeah, I would say that at this point, I think it is more or less impossible for Toni to get back into the game. He doesn't have enough tempo cards. He has an answer to one of these Drake Catchers permanently. He has an Into the Floodmaw to bounce another. But the end result is still the same, where at the end step, Ian is going to make, or in response to these removal spells, Ian is going to make 2 Drakes, and there's still going to be a massive board for Toni to deal with, and he can't do that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have pressure.
The follow-up will be a Storm Chaser's Talent. Number 3 here for Toni. I'm just going to pass the turn back. So we're going to head back Ian's way, who has not made a Drake with the other Drake Catcher just yet. Spirebluff Canal is the draw. You see the hand there with Into the Floodmaw, a Storm Chaser's Talent, and the very powerful Stock Up.
That's interesting. I don't actually know if there's any reason not to make the Drake there for Ian. So to me, that shows a bit of excitement of, oh, I'm going to win this game.
I think Ian feels like he's in a good position, that's for sure.
Yep.
Here's a copy of Storm Chaser's Talent. Prowess triggers once again. There's the Otter.
Go combat, attack for.
And there's an
These
attack
are
for
3/5s.
Yep.
After turn.
This will be an end of the flood maw on one of them. Okay. And now this is a situation where single red mana up, that represents, of course, Monstrous Rage. Tony's Swift Spear is a 2/3.
Take it.
And it looks like he's just going to take this damage.
3 for 5. Yep. For 9, I'll get 3 counters here.
And so now that's 3 more counters on the Drake Catcher, which means 2 Drakes at any moment.
Yeah, and Tony's dead to a lot, but he's definitely dead to Monstrous Rage. So I think that it was very smart of him not to take that into consideration. But I also think that there really aren't cards, especially in Tony's build of Is It Prowess, that will bring the game back from this position.
Yep.
Going wide has always been the answer. There's no fire magic to be seen in Tony's build. And that means, yes, he has these draw spells, but I think that's 2 lands. I think we have our finalists.
Oh, the finals that you were thinking are going to happen. Robb is going to win this match here over Toni Portolan, 3-1. Our 2 players that were able to clinch their seat into the top 8, the earliest yesterday, are in the finals today. Is It Prowess? We found our champion of the deck. It's the youngster with back-to-back top 8s who's looking for his first Pro Tour title.
Yeah, I think
I agree.
just time and time again, extremely impressive stuff from Robb. We've been seeing it 2 Pro Tours in a row now where he's just showing immaculate understanding of the game state, of his position in matchups, when he should push and when he should defend. And in that game, really, the Drake Catchers did a lot of carrying, and that was part of the reason that he brought this build, just identifying how powerful Drake Catcher can be. And maybe we're seeing some of the weaknesses of Monastery Swift Spear and why a lot of players chose to step away from it when we see, okay, yes, you get to put on some cheaper pressure, but as soon as the game isn't going your way, suddenly it doesn't really do anything.
And it did not do much for Tony in that situation. Ian, with the Drake Catchers, is hanging out with Ailey Loney. Let's hear about that big W.
Ian, I know it probably hasn't sunk in yet, but you are in the finals of Pro Tour Final Fantasy. How you feeling?
I feel amazing. I'm still in shock. It was a really weird game. I just won to advance where I had to play weird, and I made a misplay at the end too, which really made me mad. So even though I'm very happy, I'm like, I need to make sure I can't do that again in the finals. But overall, I'm very excited right now.
Yeah, I could see you like just trying to recompose yourself there in a moment where I assume the misplay happened, but now you get to recollect yourself. You get to think about your finals, your opponent. Ken Yukihiro, some call him the Smiling Assassin. Are you ready to face him at his mono red deck?
I am. I knew going today that if I wanted to win this tournament, I would have to beat mono red, and I expect it to be Ken or one of the other great mono red players. So, I've been thinking about it all day. It's my first mono red tournament, but I prepared for it before the tournament, and I changed a card or 2. I don't think I'm playing enough for the deck, but I think I'll be fine.
Well, Ian Robb, best of luck. We'll see you in the finals and perhaps see you hoist the trophy.
Robb is headed to the finals against Ken Yukihiro. Where are we headed? Well, to the news desk, and then crowning ourselves a champion at Pro Tour Final Fantasy. Stay with us.